My name is Emma, and if you asked anyone in my family to describe me, they would say I was the dependable one, the responsible one, the daughter who always did what was expected of her. And I guess that's true. I never asked for much. I didn't expect anyone to really notice me, because from a young age, it was clear that attention was something I had to earn. I just wanted to be good enough for my dad, good enough for my stepmom Carol, and good enough for everyone around me. But I was starting to realize that no matter how hard I tried, it was never going to be enough. Bree grew up in a small town, in a house that had too many rooms and too little warmth. My mom passed away when I was 9. That was the first time I learned what it meant to truly be alone in a family. My dad, always busy with his work as a lawyer, was emotionally distant. He wasn't cruel or neglectful, not in the traditional sense. He just didn't know how to be present, how to offer comfort when I needed it. The house was cold, silent, and empty when he was away. It wasn't that he didn't care. He just didn't know how to care for me in the way that I needed. It was just the two of us, my dad and me. My younger brother, Ethan, was a toddler when my mom died, and for him, the loss never seemed to hit as hard. He didn't remember her, but I did. I remembered everything. The way she would brush my hair, the way she smelled of lavender and vanilla, the way she'd make me feel like the most important person in the world. When she died, I became my dad's caretaker, even though I wasn't old enough to understand the full weight of that responsibility. Had to learn how to make dinner at 10, how to clean the house at 12, and how to look after Ethan when Dad was working late into the night. I couldn't let myself fall apart. I couldn't let my dad see how much I was hurting. There was too much to do, and I had no one to help. So I did it all, and I did it quietly, burying my needs beneath the weight of responsibility. And then, when I was 16, my dad met Carol. Carol was everything I wasn't. She was bubbly, outgoing, and effortlessly charming. She worked as a teacher at the local high school, and from the moment she entered our lives, she brought with her a new kind of energy. She was warm and funny, the type of person who could make anyone feel comfortable in her presence. She had 2 kids of her own, Olivia, who was 2 years older than me, and Nate, who was a year younger than Ethan. They were both the kind of kids who never seemed to worry about anything. They had it all: attention, support, love, the kind of love that I had craved but never received from my dad. When Carol and my dad got married a year later, everything changed. The quiet, lonely house became filled with noise. At first, I tried to welcome them into our lives. I wanted to be a good daughter. I wanted to like Carol, to be happy for my dad. But as time went on, I began to feel something shift inside me. The more I tried to fit in with this new family, the more I realized that no matter how hard I tried, I could never be what they wanted me to be. Carol wasn't like my mom. She didn't understand me the way my mom had, and I didn't understand her either. She would try to get close to me, offering advice or asking about my day, but it always felt like she was talking to someone who wasn't really there. She never knew how to handle me, and I never knew how to handle her. It wasn't just Carol. Olivia and Nate, her kids, were a constant reminder of everything I wasn't. They didn't have to earn attention. It was just given to them. Olivia was the golden child, smart, popular, always the center of attention. She never had to work for the praise she received. Nate was charming in his own way, always the funny one, the one who made everyone laugh. They both had things that came so easily to them. It felt like they were everything I wasn't: carefree, adored, and in control. Meanwhile, I was expected to be the perfect stepdaughter, the one who always did what was asked without complaint, who showed up when I was needed, and who blended into the background when I wasn't. And that's what I did. I kept my head down, I worked hard to make everyone happy, and I tried to pretend like things were fine. But underneath it all, I was suffocating. One day, just before I turned 18, Carol sat me down in the living room. She was beaming as usual, her eyes full of excitement. "Emma," she said, "your dad and I have been talking, and we've decided it's time for you to start looking at colleges. We think you should apply to some schools out of state. You need to spread your wings, darling." 3 nodded. "Okay," I said, though my heart felt heavy in my chest. "I'll look at some options." She smiled. "Good. We want you to experience life outside of this town. Olivia's already planning to go to a big school in the city, and we think you'd do well there too." Couldn't help but feel a pang of resentment. Olivia could do whatever she wanted without anyone batting an eye. But me? I had to work twice as hard just to be seen, just to prove that I was worthy of something more than the life I'd been given. A few weeks later, Dad surprised me by sitting me down with Carol to talk about my future. We've been discussing it, and we think it would be best if you went to college out of state. Carol and I are going to help pay for it, he said, his tone businesslike as always. Blinked, taken aback. Wait, you're going to help me pay for it? Dad gave me a reassuring smile. Yes, we think you deserve a chance to get out there and do something for yourself. It's time, Emma. It wasn't that I didn't appreciate the offer. I did, but there was something about it that didn't sit right with me. It felt like an obligation, like something Carol thought would help cement her place in the family. They wanted to send me away, to make me more like Olivia, more like the perfect daughter who didn't rock the boat. I wanted to scream that I didn't need their charity, that I didn't need to be anyone else's idea of perfect, but I didn't. I just nodded and smiled, as I always did. Later that evening, when I was alone in my room, I looked at the college brochures that had been handed to me. It was all so overwhelming. The pressure to go to the right school, to be the right kind of person, smart, well-rounded, successful, but inside, I wasn't sure who I was anymore. I was just trying to get by, to do what was expected of me. I wasn't sure what I wanted for myself. I wasn't sure if anyone even cared. That night, as I lay in bed, the sound of my dad and Carol laughing downstairs echoed through the house. For the first time, I felt completely alone. And then it happened. The moment that changed everything. Carol came up to my room and knocked on the door, something she never did before. She opened it without waiting for a response and stepped inside, holding a shopping bag in her hands. "Emma, sweetheart," she said, her voice sweet but firm. "I've been thinking. I think you should go on a little vacation before you start college. It'll help you clear your head. A little getaway. Just you and me. We could go to the beach, relax, and get away from all this pressure." 3 stared at her, confused. "You and me?" "Yes," she smiled. "We're going to have some mother-daughter time. Your dad will be busy with work, and Ethan's going to stay with some friends. It'll be a chance for us to bond." 3 wanted to say no. I wanted to tell her I wasn't her daughter, that I didn't want to be a part of her little fantasy, but instead I nodded, because that was what I was supposed to do. Be agreeable. Be the one who did what was expected. And that was the beginning of everything unraveling. The vacation with Carol was everything I didn't want it to be. We went to a small beach town, tucked away at the edge of the coast. Carol was all smiles, talking about how relaxing it was going to be, and how we could bond as mother and daughter. It was supposed to be a way for us to connect, to become closer, but it only made me feel more isolated. She'd bought me new clothes, convinced me that I needed to look the part of a carefree, relaxed young woman before college, and when we got to the resort, she insisted on paying for everything. She said it was her treat, and I just had to go along with it. There was no arguing with her. She had that way about her, a way of making everything feel like it was for my benefit, even when I knew it wasn't. But I didn't protest. I just let her do it. It wasn't worth fighting, I told myself. I was going to let this one slide. The problem wasn't just the vacation. It was the constant, subtle insinuation that I wasn't capable of doing anything on my own, that I needed their help, especially when it came to money. Carol had a way of positioning herself as the benevolent savior, the one who could offer me everything I didn't have. And my dad? He was always too busy with his work to see it. A week after we returned from the beach, Carol sat me down in the living room again. This time, it was just the 2 of us, a conversation that felt too much like a setup. "I've been thinking," Carol said, her voice light but purposeful. "With you going off to college soon, it's going to be a lot for your dad to cover. You know how he is with finances. He tends to get distracted. So I was thinking, maybe we could help you with the tuition. You don't have to worry about the loans or taking out a scholarship. We'll help pay for it." 3 stared at her, confused. I knew my dad had money. He was a successful lawyer, but I also knew he wasn't the kind of person who would just hand over large sums of cash without a lot of deliberation, especially not to me. "Wait," I said, my voice cautious. "You and Dad are going to pay for all of it?" "Of course," she smiled sweetly, her hands clasped together on her lap. "It's the least we can do. You've been such a good daughter, Emma. We want you to have everything you need." He felt a knot tighten in my stomach, but I nodded. "Thank you," I said, though I felt a mix of guilt and unease. I didn't want to owe them anything, but I didn't want to be a burden either. 3 didn't realize then that this was the beginning of a long, complicated web they were weaving around me. A few weeks later, Carol handed me a check to cover my first semester's tuition. It wasn't just any check, it was large, larger than I had expected, and it was made out to the school directly, not to me. I could feel the pressure mounting with every passing day. I just want to make sure you're set, Carol said, handing it to me with an air of finality. We know it's a big change, and we want to make this as easy as possible for you. No more worrying about money, Emma. We've got you. That phrase, we've got you, echoed in my mind long after I left the room. It sounded nice, even reassuring, but there was something about it that didn't sit right. I wasn't sure what it was, but I had a feeling it was more than just their generosity. In the weeks that followed, I started to notice the small ways in which Carol and Dad's help started to come with strings attached. The first time it hit me was when I needed money for textbooks. I had bought the tuition with the check Carol had given me, but the additional costs for supplies and textbooks had caught me off guard. It wasn't much, just a few $100s, but it was enough to make me realize that the offer of help wasn't as simple as it seemed. 3 texted Carol one evening, asking if she could help with the additional costs. Her response was immediate. Of course, sweetie, but can you pick up a few things for us while you're out? There's a new couch we've been eyeing for the living room. I'll send you the details. It'll cost around $500. We'll just add it to the amount you need. 3 was taken aback, but I tried to keep my tone light. A couch? I thought you said you were helping with my tuition. We are, darling, she replied almost too quickly. But we just thought this was a good time to take care of things. Don't worry, it won't take long. Just a small favor, and we'll square everything up. You're not spending that much, right? 3 didn't want to argue. It was just a few $100 extra, right? I didn't want to make a scene, so I agreed. But the favors didn't stop there. Carol began to ask for more and more from me. Small tasks that somehow always required money. When I needed a car repair, she offered to help. But when the bill came in, she asked if I could cover part of it because they had other financial commitments. When I came back from a weekend visit to my mom's grave, she casually mentioned that they were thinking of redoing the kitchen and maybe it wouldn't be such a bad idea for me to contribute since I was about to start earning money once I started school. I couldn't understand it. It wasn't that they were asking for huge amounts. It was the constant, insidious pressure to give. Emma, you're so responsible, Dad said one evening when I brought up the possibility of getting a part-time job. I think it'd be a good idea for you to start saving for your future. A few extra dollars won't hurt. 3 wasn't sure what he meant by saving for my future. After all, they were already helping me pay for everything. But there was that familiar sense of guilt, the feeling that I should be grateful for whatever they gave me, no matter how small or how unreasonable. It wasn't until later that I realized how much I had been conditioned to accept their help, to see it as an obligation I couldn't refuse. Then came the bombshell. One afternoon, after I had come back from a long day at the university, Carol called me into the living room. She was sitting on the couch, looking unusually serious. Emma, she said, her tone soft but firm, we've been talking, and your dad and I think it's time you start contributing more. You know how expensive things are, and we really don't think it's fair for us to shoulder all the costs. So we're going to need you to start paying us back for the tuition. Froze. What do you mean, pay you back? I asked, my heart suddenly pounding. Well, you've been living here for years, and now you're going off to college. You need to pay us back for all the things we've done for you, sweetie. It's just the way things work in this family. My head was spinning. I felt the walls closing in on me, like I was trapped in a maze with no way out. I don't understand, I stammered. I thought you were helping me, out of generosity because you wanted to support me. Carol's smile was tight, almost calculating. Of course we're supporting you, but you have to understand, Emma, nothing comes for free. You've been given so much already, and now it's time to return the favor. 3 stood there, feeling a lump form in my throat. I had been fooled. All along, they had been positioning me to depend on them, knowing full well that the moment I was vulnerable, they would ask for more. Is that all? I asked, my voice trembling with barely controlled emotion. You want me to pay you back? Carol didn't answer, but the look in her eyes said it all. That night, as I lay in bed, the weight of it all settled on my chest. My mind raced. I had always known I wasn't really a part of their perfect little family. I had always known my place was at the edge, just outside the circle of love and attention. But now, I realized just how far they were willing to go to make sure I stayed in my place. 3 wasn't sure what hurt more, the fact that they'd done this to me, or the fact that I'd allowed it to happen. Should have seen it coming. They had set the stage so carefully, pulling me deeper into their web, making me feel like I owed them more than just gratitude. They convinced me I needed their help, that my success was only possible because of their generosity. But in the end, all I was a pawn in their game. 3 It started with the small things, the subtle shifts in tone, the glances between Carol and my dad when they thought I wasn't paying attention. I could feel it, the unspoken agreement between them that I was no longer a daughter but a resource, a means to get what they wanted. But the true betrayal didn't come until one phone call changed everything. It was a Thursday, the middle of my second semester. I'd been juggling school and my part-time job at the bookstore, trying to make up for the things I'd been asked to cover, trying to keep my head above water. I thought I had things under control until I received a call from the bank. "Hello, Miss Pierce. This is Anna from Redstone Bank. We noticed a large withdrawal from your account, and we just wanted to verify that it was authorized by you." 3 froze. A large withdrawal? My stomach sank. I hadn't made any withdrawals, certainly not without checking first. I didn't make any withdrawal, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "What do you mean, large?" The woman explained that $7,500 had been taken from my account and transferred to an unknown account. I could feel my heart racing as she read off the details. The bank's security team already in the process of trying to trace the transaction. I had no idea who could have done it, but I was certain of one thing. It had to be someone who had access to my personal information. 3 hung up the phone, my hands shaking. There was only one person who knew that much about my finances, Carol. 3 hadn't been entirely blind to their behavior, but I had convinced myself that things were just complicated, that maybe I was overreacting. Now, as the realization hit me, I felt like I had been living in a fog, unaware of how deep I was in it. Carol had always been generous with her advice, with her help, but now it was clear. She had been planning this for months. 3 tried to stay calm, but the anger was building, rising in me like a tidal wave. I needed to get to the bottom of this. I needed answers. He grabbed my things and stormed out of my room, heading straight for the kitchen where my dad was having his usual afternoon coffee. "Dad?" I said, my voice barely containing my frustration. "I need to talk to you." He looked up from his cup, a frown forming when he saw the look on my face. "What's wrong, Emma?" 2 Carol took money from my account, I said, the words coming out more harshly than I intended. "She transferred $7,500 without asking me, without telling me." His face turned pale, and he pushed his chair back slowly. "What are you talking about?" That's not possible." "Check with the bank," I snapped. "They confirmed it. And you want to know the worst part? She's been asking me for money for months, but I didn't know it would go this far. She's been treating me like I'm an ATM." My dad's face shifted, but not in the way I hoped. He wasn't angry. He wasn't protective. Instead, he looked defensive. "You know, Emma," he started, his voice low, "your mother and I have tried to help you. It's hard to explain everything, but Carol's just trying to help too. You have to understand, things are tight right now, and you can't expect us to carry all the weight. We've been generous enough." Third couldn't believe what I was hearing. His words were like a slap in the face. I had been working for months to try and keep my head above water. I had been saving everything I could. I had asked for nothing from them except their support. And here they were, twisting the truth into something that made me feel guilty for not giving more. "So you're saying it's okay for her to just take from me?" I demanded, my voice rising. "She's been taking advantage of me from the beginning, and you've been enabling her." My dad shifted uncomfortably in his chair, eyes darting away from mine. "I'm not saying it's okay, but Carol's just trying to make sure everything works out. She's looking out for us, for you. She wants to see you succeed." He could feel the weight of his words crushing me. There it was again, the "we've got you" mentality. Only now did it feel like a trap. It wasn't about support anymore. It was about control. "Dad, she's been talking to me," I shouted, my voice cracking. "And you're sitting here telling me it's okay?" 3 didn't wait for an answer. I stormed out of the kitchen, my heart hammering in my chest. It was clear now, they had crossed a line. They weren't just manipulating me emotionally, they were using me for money, for whatever they could get. And worst of all, they thought I wouldn't realize it. 3 felt sick, betrayed in a way I couldn't explain. For years, I had tried to be the perfect daughter, the one who never asked for too much, the one who always said yes, the one who followed the rules. But now, all that had gotten me was a debt I couldn't repay. I spent the rest of the evening locked in my room, trying to make sense of what had happened. The anger that had boiled inside me earlier had settled into a cold, hard realization. I couldn't trust them anymore. Not Carol, not my dad, not anyone in this family who had spent years making me feel small, making me feel like I owed them everything. The next day, I decided to take action. I couldn't just sit around waiting for things to get worse. I couldn't let them continue to use me like this. 3 walked into the bank and explained what had happened. I demanded that they stop the transaction and freeze my accounts, but they told me it was too late. The money had already been transferred to a third-party account, and there was nothing they could do to retrieve it. Frustrated and defeated, I left the bank and sat in my car, staring at the dashboard. They had taken what wasn't theirs, and I had no way of getting it back. I was trapped. But the worst part wasn't the money. It was the realization that I wasn't just a victim. I was complicit in my own suffering. I had allowed myself to be manipulated, to be gaslit into believing I wasn't worth more than the scraps they gave me. And now, I had nothing left to lose. 3 sat at my desk, staring at the phone screen, a knot of anxiety tightening in my chest. The bank had confirmed that they couldn't reverse the transaction. $7,500 was gone, vanished without a trace. And now I was left with nothing but the empty feeling of betrayal. 3 had spent the night awake, going over everything in my mind, the small ways they'd chipped away at me, the subtle manipulations that had made me feel like I was always indebted to them, the silent promises of love and support that masked the truth. The realization hit hard. They never cared about me. They cared about what I could give them. And now I had nothing left to give. 3 needed to confront them. I needed to finally stand up for myself, to put an end to the cycle of guilt and manipulation that had followed me for so long. I couldn't be their cash cow anymore. I couldn't keep pretending like everything was fine when they were draining me dry. Emotionally and financially, it was time to cut ties. The thought of confronting them terrified me. They were my family after all. My dad, the man who had raised me, who I had once believed would always protect me, and Carol, his wife, who I had once considered a second mother. But this wasn't about family anymore. This was about survival. 3 dialed Carol's number first. My hands shook as I waited for her to pick up. Hello? Her voice sounded so casual, so normal. It made my stomach churn. Carol, I said, my voice steady but firm. I know what you did. I know about the money. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could almost hear her scrambling for words. Finally, she spoke. Emma, I can explain, she started, her tone turning defensive. You don't need to explain anything, I cut in. You took my money without asking. You stole from me. 3 could hear her sucking in a breath, and then she sighed, almost in frustration. It wasn't like that, Emma. I did it because I thought you'd be okay with it. Your dad and I have been struggling lately, and we were trying to make ends meet. Clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms. You've been taking advantage of me for months, Carol. You've been asking for money, and I gave it to you because I thought you needed help. But this is theft. I'm done. 3 paused, gathering the strength to say the next words. I'm cutting you off, financially, emotionally, everything. I'm not giving you another dime. I don't want you in my life anymore. There was a long pause. I could almost hear her processing what I'd said, trying to figure out how to get out of it, how to make me feel guilty for finally standing up for myself. Emma, she said finally, her voice laced with irritation. You don't understand what's at stake here. Your father and I have done so much for you, and now you're turning your back on us? This is how you repay us? The words stung, but I didn't back down. You didn't do anything for me, Carol. You used me. You manipulated me into giving you everything. But I'm done being your charity case. I've had enough. 3 hung up the phone before she could say anything else, before I could hear her try to twist the situation back on me. I felt a wave of anger and relief wash over me, but the relief didn't last long. I still had to face my dad. 3 took a deep breath and dialed his number next. This was going to be harder. It was one thing to confront Carol. It was another to confront my father. But I had to do it. For myself. Dad? I said when he answered, my voice tight. We need to talk. He sounded casual, almost dismissive. What about Emma? I know what happened with the money, I said, my words deliberate. And I'm not going to sit by and pretend like it's okay anymore. You and Carol have been taking from me for months. And I'm done. I'm not giving you anything. Not a cent. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. So long that I thought he might have hung up. Then he finally spoke. You're being dramatic, he said, his voice cold. You know we've been struggling, right? You know how hard it is to keep everything afloat. This was never about using you. We were helping each other. No, Dad, I said, feeling the tears sting at the back of my eyes. This wasn't about helping each other. This was about you and Carol taking advantage of me, using me to get what you want, and making me feel like I owed you something in return. Well, I don't owe you anything. Not anymore. 3 could hear the hurt in his voice, but it wasn't the kind of hurt I had expected. It wasn't a regret. It wasn't sorrow. It was disappointment, the kind of disappointment you feel when someone stops playing the part you assigned them. You're being unfair, he said, his voice trembling now. I've done everything for you. I've given you everything. And now you're throwing it all away? No, Dad, I replied, feeling the weight of the words but knowing they were the truth. I'm not throwing anything away. I'm taking my life back, and I'm not going to keep letting you and Carol use me. There was another long silence, this time heavier, more final. When he spoke again, his voice was low, almost resigned. I don't know what to say, Emma, he said, his words heavy with a mix of anger and sorrow. Maybe I've been too hard on you, but I'm your father and I've done what I thought was best. Maybe you thought so, I said, my voice breaking, but you were wrong. You used me, and I can't keep being part of that. 3 hung up the phone without waiting for his response. My heart was pounding, my mind racing. I had just cut ties with the 2 people I had once called my family, and despite the hollow ache in my chest, the weight on my shoulders began to lift. Knew I had done the right thing. I couldn't keep living in their shadow, couldn't keep letting them dictate my worth. I had my own life to build, my own future to create, and if that meant walking away from the people who had always treated me like a means to an end, then so be it. The days that followed my decision were a blur of mixed emotions. Relief, anger, sadness, but mostly, a quiet sense of freedom I had never known before. I no longer had to answer to them, no longer had to explain myself or justify my choices. I was free. Free from the financial strain they had put on me, free from their guilt trips, free from the constant weight of expectation. It felt like I had finally taken control of my life. I ate first. I was scared. The silence from my dad and Carol was deafening. There were no phone calls, no texts asking for help, or pretending like nothing had changed. I felt the absence of their voices in my life like a hollow space. But as time went on, that hollow space began to fill with something new, something real. Threw myself into my work. I had been holding back for so long, worried about what they would think if I succeeded, worried that I might be accused of abandoning them if I did too well. Now that they were out of the picture, I didn't have to worry about their judgment. I could focus on what mattered to me. Who spent late nights at the office brainstorming new ideas, taking on projects that challenged me, and ultimately leading a team that trusted me. The promotions came faster than I expected, and before long, I was in a position I had only dreamed of, a manager at the firm with the power to make real decisions, to shape the direction of my career. Invested in myself. I took classes to further my skills. I networked with people who valued me for who I was, not for what I could give them. I joined a mentorship program where I connected with people who had built businesses from the ground up, who saw potential in me even when I couldn't see it in myself. It felt good to finally be surrounded by people who cared about my growth, not my bank account. 3 didn't just succeed professionally. I started taking care of myself in ways I had never allowed myself to before. I joined a gym and found a passion for fitness that I hadn't realized was there. I learned to cook meals that made me feel nourished, not just physically, but emotionally. I started painting again, something I had loved as a child, but had given up on long ago.